So we're starting a new message series today. I'm so thankful that you joined us for this time. And we're talking about this issue of trust. In God we trust. This is a phrase, of course, that's printed on our currency. It's a phrase that is very significant to many folks, that we choose to place our trust in God. But this issue of trust, it's a bit of a challenging one for us as human beings. I mean, if you watch any form of media or consume any form of media nowadays, you probably have seen just a few political ads. Am I right? And how many of these things do they talk about trust, right? I'm the candidate that you can trust to send to Washington, Columbus, wherever it is we're sending them to, because I'm different than the rest of the candidates. And we say, really? Are you really any different? Isn't this just the same thing that we hear every time we have these? And don't get me wrong. I'm so thankful that we get to live in America, that we get to have this incredible freedom to vote. It truly is a wonderful blessing that we have. It's a great thing, and I wouldn't trade our system for any other. But you know, this issue of trust is difficult because we elect human beings, right? And human beings are sometimes hard to trust. And we hear them on their ads, and we get tired of hearing them on their ads. And they say these things, you know, like, I'm the kind of candidate you can trust, because I'm the kind of guy who, you know, likes to help sweet old ladies across the street in the rain. You know, I care about my constituents that much. And then they've got the picture of the guy with his umbrella helping grandma or some fake grandma who he hired as an actress across the street, right? But my opponent, my highly esteemed opponent, on the other hand, is not quite the same in his care for sweet old ladies. In fact, he spends some time with them in the rain, but he's more interested in shoving them into mud puddles in the rain. Do you want to vote for the guy who wants grandma to be falling into a mud puddle? Neither do I. So vote for me in November, right? We say, are you serious? Do you think we really, how are we going to trust you? We don't know you that well, or we look at your record and it's questionable at best. Trust is a difficult thing. And trust means it challenges us to actually do something because we have that trust. If we say that we trust someone, if we say that we trust a candidate, then the expectation is that we'll vote for that candidate, because we trust that they're the best person for the job. Or you go to the doctor, and the doctor tells you you need to have some tests done, and maybe it costs some money, but you say, well, I guess I choose that I trust this doctor, and I'm gonna do this because the doctor says so, and that person, you know, she's the doctor, so I'm gonna listen. Or you go to the car mechanic, they recommend the repair. Well, if you have that relationship of trust with that person, then you act on it. You don't say, well, I trust you, but I'm really not going to have that done just because, I don't know, I don't feel like it. I don't need to explain why, I just don't feel like it. Well, if you trust him, you do something about it, right? Because trust involves actions. And it's a challenging thing. I remember one time I was part of a team who was serving at a camp. And we didn't know each other, of course, outside of this camp. And we all got together, and we had like 2 days to bond as a team before campers would start coming. And it was important that we knew each other and that we trusted each other, because we had a lot of responsibility, you know, taking care of people's kids throughout the summer. And so they decided to try to kind of expedite our process of trust by having us do some exercises together. And so one of them we did, I thought was kind of challenging, especially with a group of people that you didn't know very well. And why don't we just act it out here? Because I love acting out some of my most painful moments in preaching, right? That's what this is for, right? Or something. So I need 6 guys to volunteer and come right up here, okay? I'm not going to go out there and pick you, but 6 reasonably sized guys. If you would come up just to this area, I promise I won't make you make any speeches or something like that. 3, I see 4. We need just 2 more. All right, that's 5, 2. We need 1. All right, we've got 6. All right, good deal. Let's give these guys a hand. I appreciate them. Now, so I chose 6 because there were 7 of us that day, so counting myself. And so we needed to do these exercises to build trust. And so one of them, the first one that we did, was called the trust fall, right? You familiar with this? Okay, so some of you, have you done this before? Anybody kind of, yeah, so you know what you're talking about here. Okay, so the thing is, they were saying, when you trust people, it's not just a blind act, right? You don't just trust people because human beings showed up. You trust people for logical reasons, intelligent reasons that make sense. They said, so if you were going to fall and trust that these folks would catch you, you want to really have good reasons to believe that they're going to catch you, right? And so they gave some instructions, and I'll give you guys the same instructions. What we do is we take our arm, we stretch one out, and grab the other one right about that elbow level, okay? So you grab your own arm, right? Good. And then you grab the other guys. Yeah, except it works better if they're not crossed. So if we do kind of like this. Perfect. Outstanding. See, I have a vested interest in these guys doing this right. And so I look down and I have a semi-level of confidence that these guys can hold hands like this, right? And I know this is awkward. We're guys, we don't hold hands, but sorry. You said I wouldn't embarrass you, now I am. But, so we have these folks down here, and you look at them and you say, so I've got to trust that these guys would catch me. And I have reason because they're reasonably sized, strong people, right? I love all the sweet grandmas in the room today, but I didn't ask you to volunteer today, right? There's a reason, because I trust more that these guys would catch me than 6 of our most wonderful grandmas in the room. And so that day they took like a ladder and they set it there, and they said, so we're going to set this ladder here, and you've got to kind of like climb up on this ladder. At this point, you're looking out at these folks, and you're saying, I don't really know them that well, right? Now, this is better today because I actually know these guys quite a bit better than I knew anybody in the group that day. But still, you look down and you say, I want to trust these guys, right? I do. It would be kind of weird to be like, I don't trust you people. I'm out of here. I quit this camp. I've had it. That would be kind of weird. So, but you still have those moments of saying, if I say that I trust, if I believe what the director said, that this is the best way to catch somebody, it's not like this or this, it's this. If I believe those things, then I got to do something about it. If I actually trust, but I'm unwilling to do something, do I really trust at all? Otherwise, saying that I trust is just kind of a bunch of words. So they challenged and said, well, you got to turn around because you don't do this facing forward. That would be kind of dumb. Not that this is really all that intelligent anyway, but so, and I remember standing there at this point thinking, I don't know if these people are really trustworthy. And this could be a bad start to my summer, right? Falling from a ladder onto the ground. But at the end of the day, if I say that I trust them and I'm unwilling to do anything, truth is, I don't really trust them, right? So they said, you got to cross your arms, because if you don't cross your arms, the hazard is not to you, it's the people around you, because you tend to flail when you're falling. And if you flail, you tend to punch them in the nose. And if the last thing they feel before they catch you is being punched in the nose, they're less likely to catch you. So it is to your advantage to cross those arms. So I remember crossing my arms, and I'm gonna do this, okay? So I need you guys to believe that I'm going to do this. Because if you're standing here saying, I don't think he's going to do this, it's going to be a problem for me, right? So I remember they said, okay, we've got to count to 3. And that's where it gets a little scary. Because you decide this trust actually has to be put into action. Okay, count of 3. Are we ready? We good? All right, good deal. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Oh, you guys are awesome. Oops, sorry. Give those guys a hand. They're amazing. I am so glad that I can trust those people, let me tell you. Could have been really awkward, but a great YouTube moment, right? Like pastor drops himself on the floor. But if you say that you trust and you don't do anything to demonstrate that trust, do you actually trust? Trust leads us to action. Jesus was talking one time with a group of Jewish leaders, and it wasn't a bad conversation. Sometimes they were kind of out to trap Jesus. It wasn't one of those conversations. He was answering some questions about God that they had. And so he had responded to one of them, and then another question came up. We're in Mark chapter 12. You can turn there if you want, or you'll find it on the screens. Mark chapter 12, beginning in verse 28. One of the teachers of religious law was standing there listening to the discussion. He realized that Jesus had answered well, so he asked, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" Jesus replied, "The most important commandment is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is the one and only Lord. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these." Now, Jesus was quoting from the Old Testament, from a few passages that were referenced in something called the Shema, which this was what the Jews would recite every morning and every evening. This was central to their beliefs. And he's affirming that, and he's saying, here's what this is all about. If you take the whole Old Testament, you take our relationship with God and summarize it real simply, it's about loving God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. That's what's most important. And right behind it, after we have that love with God established, is love your neighbor as yourself. Love others in that way. And that's how we demonstrate our trust in God. All our heart, all our soul, all our mind, all of our strength. We give that to God. And we love our neighbor as ourselves. That's how we demonstrate this love for others. It's an all-in kind of love. Notice that he doesn't say, love the Lord your God with most of your heart, most of your mind, most of your soul, and some of your strength. No, all. All means all. Are we all in? In our faith in Jesus, in our relationship with God, are we all in? And for every person in this room, that question should give us some pause. Because I bet you for every one of us, we would say, well, in this area of my life, I'm pretty much all in. In this area, not so much. I give some of it to God. I take some of it back. I give some of it to God. Or maybe I choose just to not let God touch this area of my life. It's just going to be mine. Are we all in? Holding nothing back. We only make a few of these kind of commitments in life. I mean, we're committed to many things in life, but very few commitments in life are truly all-in kind of commitments. Most of them are very temporal or short-term or something like that. One of the times that we make an all-in commitment, it's one of my favorite things as a pastor, is weddings. For weddings, I sometimes get to wear one of these little things. Sometimes. Other times we just wear a suit, but you know. And at a wedding, we celebrate the bride and the groom coming together to make this all-in kind of commitment. It's not like a partial commitment, is it? It's all in. I mean, if you've ever been to a wedding, you know that this couple is making this commitment where they're basically saying, look, of all the people in the world, anybody that I could choose, I choose to be married to you. I'm choosing to leave everybody else behind and to be married to you. I'm all in. I'm all in. Okay, so why instead of just talking about it, why don't we do this? Why don't we have a wedding right here today? Doesn't that sound good? I think it looks like we got an eligible groom right there. We need a groom. I think we need a bride. Do we have some bride music? Anybody? Oh, we got a bride. That means you know what to do, folks. You've been to weddings. Come on. On your feet. Well, dearly beloved, you may have a seat. We can turn off the music too. It's a great song, though, don't you think? Dearly beloved, we have gathered here today to celebrate the wedding of Josh and Amy. And it is such a joy. Aren't you excited for this great couple? I sure am. Josh and Amy have decided that they want to be married to one another, to give themselves fully to each other. They've also decided that they're going to have an amazing reception, so we need to keep this very, very short, okay? So we are going to go straight to their vows for one another, which they have chosen to write themselves in order to reflect their true love and commitment to one another. Amy, would you begin?
I, Amy, take you, Josh, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse. But I know you'll always be better. I mean, you are marrying me, so that's sure to make you better. For richer, for poorer, although if you lose your job and you start sitting around on the couch, I am out. And in sickness and in health. John, does baldness count as a sickness? Because I have some serious concerns around baldness.
I would stick to the vows.
Okay.
Great.
To love and to cherish till death do us part, or until my feelings of love for him die. And I mean, that's a type of death too, right?
Josh, you have some vows that you have written as well. Josh, would you please recite your vows to Amy?
I, Josh, take you, Amy, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse. But, John, I have a question. How much worse are we talking about here? Like 20, she gains 20 pounds worse, or if she gains 100 pounds worse?
That's a really dangerous question, Josh. I keep on moving.
Okay. For richer or for poor? Although if you spend too much of our money and make me poor, then I'm out of here. I'm not having that. Anyway, in sickness and in health, but I don't do puking. That's just gross. To love and to cherish till death do us part, or until I trade her in on a younger model, if you know what I mean.
You may kiss the bride. That was kind of awkward, wasn't it? Can you imagine? Can you imagine a wedding like that? No, of course not. We would never marry a couple who would say those things. We'd say, folks, you're not ready for this. You don't understand what all in means. All in is not a conditional statement. You don't get to put these, I promise to love you forever, as long as you're doing what I want you to do, as long as you're meeting my expectations. That's not all in. That is not all in. And that will not work in a marriage. And it also will not work in our relationship with Jesus. He calls us to be truly all in. That's what it means to have Jesus as our Lord, Jesus as our leader. Because what you saw here, that's not true love. Instead, that's a very self-centered, me-first kind of love. And love puts the other first every time. Love isn't so focused on me, it's focused on the other person. And God calls us to have that kind of love. Because you see, when we truly trust someone, we're willing to give ourselves to them in love. And when we truly trust God, we are willing to give ourselves more fully to God. In God we trust, right? We even write that on the back of our currency, don't we? And in God we trust. It's an interesting statement because if true, it means that we act on it. I mean, if I say that I trust God, but I do nothing to demonstrate my trust for God, do I actually trust God? Well, not very much. Not based upon my actions, because true trust requires actions. It requires us to be willing to make that fall, not knowing for sure what the end is going to be, or to make those vows even though we know the other person is certainly going to change and grow and develop, but we choose to make those vows because of love, because of trust. That is what that's all about. And the same's true in our relationship with God. That's why Jesus says you love God with your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. If you've got your notes, I want to take a few kind of action steps this week. We're going to look at just real briefly each of these areas, and I'm going to ask you, what does it mean for you to trust God a little more fully in each of these areas? And this should not be some guilt-inducing time. Trust me, none of us would say, oh, I'm good. I trust God fully in all these areas. In fact, I would bet that every person in this room, if we're truly honest, would say, there's ways in each of these areas I can grow. So if you've got something that God lays on your heart, just write it down. You're not turning these in or putting these up on a board here or something. This is for your purposes, okay? So your heart. The heart It's the core of our being. That's what it meant to the Jews when they said that. That's what it meant in their language. What are the things that are central to who you are? Maybe this is your family, your health, your finances, your job, whatever. These things that are, you say, these are central to who I am as a person. What would it look like for you to trust God a little bit more in these areas? How could you show that trust? Just write something down if God lays something on your heart. The second thing Jesus talks about is our soul. Our soul. That's our connection with God. That's prayer, reading the Bible, our community groups, coming to worship, these kinds of things. These are what feed our soul, what help us to grow in our faith. What would it look like for you to trust God a little bit more with your soul? Maybe you say, I could pray more, or I could read my Bible more, or I need to get in a group, or something like that. What might that look like? Third is our mind. Our mind is where our fears reside. It's where our hopes reside. It's an incredible gift that God has given us to be able to deal rationally with these things, to let our fears keep us out of trouble, but yet not hold us back from what God's calling us to, and to let our hopes inspire us for the future, to see God's grander vision of what could be in our lives. What would it look like to give your mind a little more fully to God? Maybe there's things that you're putting into your mind that are just not helpful, that you need to take out. Maybe it's a matter of having some better input. Whatever it may be, write that down. Fourth is our strength. Now, our strength, these are these things that we have a lot of control over, and we get to choose kind of what we do with them. It's areas of power. Perhaps this is resources for you. You know, you've got time. That's an area of strength. We've all got 24 hours in a day, guaranteed. Until the day you die, you got 24 hours in the day. And so what are you doing with that? Also, one of the key areas is dollars. So what do we do with our financial resources? How am I trusting God? You know, it says in God we trust, but what am I doing to actually trust God? Do I do that? Just a moment here, we're going to take a time that's kind of a little more focused on Stillwater regular people, right? So if you're a guest today, you can kind of tune me out for a minute. I mean, you could have already, but I gave you permission this time, right? So, but you know, if this is your church, if Stillwater Church is your church, you know, God challenges us to give generously. Jesus talks a lot about generosity, that God loves a cheerful giver. And when we do this, it's a way of honoring God and saying, God, I trust you. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, does the church needs money? Well, of course, we all know that that's the case. We all know that. But it's much more about our relationship with Jesus, saying, Jesus, I choose to trust you. And since Stillwater Church is where I choose to attend, I choose to make my financial commitment to be there. Not that I don't support anything else in the world, but I choose to make a significant financial commitment there because that's where I'm called to be. And, you know, truthfully, if we don't, if me, you, us, if we don't support Stillwater Church, it doesn't exist, right? We all know that. That's just a simple, basic fact. And when we see great ministries happen, we know that it's because of our generosity that God does so many great things through us. And when we dream about the future and we say, what could be? What could be next? What could be next? We know that our ability to trust God with this stuff is a key part of that. The Bible talks about tithing. Tithing is giving that 10% back to God, 10% of our income. And that is something that takes some growth sometimes. Most of the time when we first give our lives to Jesus, we're not quite there yet. Sometimes folks are, but other times it takes us a bit to get our finances reorganized. The question that we ask is your growth in giving, is it towards tithing, or maybe you're there already, but is your growth in giving, is it modeling your spiritual growth? Because if you've been around the church for a while, if you've been around faith for a while, and yet you're not anywhere near this, it's kind of one of those moments like if you're standing on that stool saying, oh, sure, God, I trust you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not falling to those people. That's crazy. But I trust you. I promise I do. Trust requires action. Trust requires action. And our giving is one of the ways we demonstrate that. And finally, number 5, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, this is challenging. First, it means we should love ourselves. God calls us to do that. Second, it means we should love our neighbors unselfishly. That's another reason why we're generous with our strength, because we want for others to come to know Jesus, and we want to give so that that can happen. And when we give to them, in our time, our talents, whatever, when we give to support still our church, other ministries, we know that God uses that giving to help change our neighbor's life. Who's your neighbor? Well, Jesus said everybody, right? You remember that parable of the Good Samaritan? He challenged us to have that kind of love for the whole world. You see, friends, when we truly trust Jesus, we support it with those actions. So as you look at that list, what are some things you could do this week? Maybe you say, oh my goodness, I can't fix all these things this week. That's fine. Pick one. Pick one this week. Do it, move on to the next. But I challenge you, don't sit there and say, yeah, I trust God, but I'm not doing much about it. You got to do something. Would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you for calling us to trust you. It's a tough call. It is. And we each wrestle with that in our own unique ways. But God, I pray that you would give us the courage this morning to step forward in trust, to step forward in action, that our trust would not just be something we talk about, but instead something we do. Lord, we thank you for your love for us, God. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.